Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming Helen Jarvis from the brand new 10-part FX adaptation of the epic 1975 James Clavell novel Shōgun to our TV production designers meet the experts panel. Helen, did I read that when you were brought in to work on this series, you had never been to Japan, never read the Clavell novel, and never worked on as a production designer
I,
on a limited series before?
well, yes, all of the above is true. It's a bit unfortunate because I did say all those things, but I don't think I said them in one sentence. So every time,
Wow,
every time I
that's
go on,
one heck of a sales pitch.
I do. I mean, I thought it made me very wary about being quoted directly. Anyway, that is true. I avoided the book in 1975 because it was far too thick, and I would probably never get through it. And I know everybody around me read the book. And yeah, I'd not worked on a series before. And so that was a very interesting proposal, to do 10 episodes. I'd worked on a number of feature films. So it's a slightly different dynamic there. And for one thing, the idea that you have several different directors to work with was quite new to me. And no, I've never been to Japan. I plan to go. I'm off to Nepal shortly, but I think next time round I'll hit Japan. I'd love to go there. Really would.
I'm in awe of you here, Helen, because you were able to pull this off and do this unbelievably sumptuous design of a show, despite all of the above. So I'm not busting you on this. I'm basically in awe of your skill in spite of it. Uh, you also didn't have the luxury of working on this in Japan, right? But primarily in Vancouver, British Columbia,
Yes,
where it was
yes.
shot. Just a small bit in Japan, correct?
No, none of it was shot in
Oh,
Japan.
really? Not at all.
Yeah, no, there was a plan originally when I signed on. There was a plan afoot to do 6 weeks or something like that in Japan, and that very quickly faded. I mean, we were still in the throes of COVID lockdowns. This was very, very early 2021. And as I understood it, things really shut down in Japan. And so that made it really awkward, to be able to bring crews over there and to have actors. So a lot of our actors who came from Japan were kind of came to Vancouver and had to stay for a year because they couldn't really go back and forth. So all of that complicated. Everybody seemed very far flung when we started the show, which was quite interesting. I got used to at that point. I was so used to working from home, with a crew of people that you Zoom with twice a day, and so it wasn't too difficult to get started. But it would have been nice to have had a bit more sort of round the table type of dynamic.
Right.
I would have enjoyed that. Um,
How do you even begin to recreate a look 400 years in the past? I mean, did you ever worked on anything similarly historic, Helen? And I mean, where do you find the confidence that you could pull this off so spectacularly?
Well, I think for me, it was like tackling a sort of a cultural, a new culture. I never had no experience of, there wasn't a single piece of crown molding or, you know, dado trim, nothing that you could ever recognize. And I think that was like this sort of fresh slate feel to the show, which the story was so good. And once you start the research of the sort of the principles of the architecture, is very engaging. You really you come to appreciate the sort of the beauty of nature because so many of your interiors are reliant on having beautiful exteriors. Or all of the sets have to open onto gardens, onto vistas. So that was all very pleasing. To be even though we were 50% or more in the studio, there was just a lovely sort of open air feel to everything, which I think comes across, when we embrace the rain in Vancouver. So there's a lot of very moist atmospheric vistas, which was kind of, I think, really augmented what we did in terms of
It actually just like accidentally really
yeah.
suited everything.
Oh, I know. We saw all the seasons, and there's a certain kind of cool blue-gray moisture to a lot of the exterior scenes that just sort of helped support the story, I felt.
What were the primary challenges in designing a fishing village, a harbor, royal palaces, samurai houses, and these sets were many kilometers apart, right?
They were, yes, they were. We got very lucky. We had a couple of really good location choices open to us. The fishing village you mentioned first, that is a private property, I'm not sure, 30, 40 kilometers north of Vancouver. Beautiful bay, lovely little, tiny little bay with a kind of a spit with a couple of beautiful looking trees that look very Japanese in style. And once we locked down that as our fishing village location, it soon followed suit with a couple of other backlot locations. And so I kind of had a couple of teams working, there were these sort of rural buildings being worked on by a certain group of art directors. And then we got heavily into the Osaka Palace sets on stage. So it was like several themes going at once. And I had a really great crew, really great
So
crew.
many logistics. I would imagine that's a big part of the challenge, is just logistically keeping track of everyone and
Yes.
and overseeing everything, and
Yeah.
being 10 places at once.
I think, having worked as a supervising art director primarily in my career, I've always viewed that as project management on a large scale. So I found myself, when I was tackling 10 episodes, I was very early on, I was mapping out what a certain set would look like eight episodes from now, just because I think I've developed a kind of an antenna for developing and keeping all these plates spinning in the air at once. And I think that comes from being an art director for many years. And that helped me immensely. I'm not terribly linear thinker. I do 5 things at once. So all of that was helpful, I thought.
How closely did you work with your costume designer, Carlos Rosario, too?
Pretty
Was
close.
that a big part of it?
It was a big part of it, yes and no. I mean, I had to walk through the wardrobe department 10 times a day in order to get down to the stages. So I was always looking in on the costumes. And he and I spent some time at the beginning. I not having worked with him before, I thought, well, okay, I should develop some themes here, some sort of color. We need to get together and get the colors right. And that process was really simple. As soon as we kind of meshed what I was doing with what he was doing, it just seemed to all flow together nicely. And I think we were very sort of mutually supportive. And I do think that I still really believe that a good portion of what you're looking at is the gorgeous costumes with a bit of background. And I felt I had to keep things fairly neutral, what I would call neutral, in order for the costumes and the beautiful fabrics to really sing. So I do think that we collaborated quite well there.
That's awfully humble of you to want your designs to blend in, so you're not stomping all over the costumes. I that speaks very well. I guess maybe that's an art director's perspective too, that
I think so. Yeah.
you don't want to stand out too much, or maybe that doesn't speak well of the designs. You want to blend.
Yeah.
What was your biggest design challenge, would you say, in creating the whole Shōgun world here, Helen?
I can't think it was any one set in particular. It was a sort of, again, not having access to all the directors at once and trying to build the building blocks of the sets and trying to work out several steps ahead of, how can I morph this, like the ceremonial meeting hall, the very large set with the gold tigers and so on. I thought, well, at first I thought, I'll put the no theater in there, and then later on I'll put a ceiling on it, and I'll take all the tatami out, and I'll change all the walls. It'll become the palace at Edo, So it was all of that kind of reckoning. I think getting all the building blocks to work and make sure it all fits. And then the certain sort of unknown aspect was, as you meet each new director and they have their opinions and how, you had to try to introduce them to my basic plan, but obviously be completely open to their suggestions as well. So very different than working on a feature film. So I don't think I've got any one particular set that was any more challenging than another, to be honest. It was more the process that was the challenge, I think.
Thank you for that. Well, I think we're gonna wrap things there. Shōgun is available to stream on Hulu. Helen Jarvis, good luck to you this Emmy season, and thanks for joining us at Gold Derby.
Thank you very much.